Hello again, friends. Jacob, Mad Crazy Reviews, back with another Director Spotlight. I've not given myself a whole lot of time to put this together. I've been trying to release these on the last day of each month this year. So far, doing pretty well, but it's currently April 28th, and the next one, therefore, due in 2 days. So we'll see how this goes. And I apologize to the audio audience because I am actually holding the microphone. I don't often do that. I usually try to have it resting on a level surface, but the way I've got things set up, it's the best I can do right now. So today we are talking about Baz Luhrmann, a guy who I honestly am not a very big fan of, but what I'm trying to do here is just have a variety of filmmakers, a variety of styles, and people who I find interesting, even if I don't necessarily like or connect with what they're doing. And I think at the worst, you can at least admit Baz Luhrmann is a very interesting filmmaker. So he's only made 6 movies, which kind of surprised me. This didn't take a whole lot of time to get through his filmography. It was just spread out over quite a while because of other things going on in my life. So I'm going to just hit the titles real quick. Strictly Ballroom, 1992. Romeo and Juliet, 1996. Moulin Rouge, 2001, Australia, 2008, The Great Gatsby, 2013, and Elvis, 2022. So some pretty big gaps in there, and I was actually, like I said, pretty surprised looking back to find that he'd only done 6 movies. He's not like a household name, but he's actually been very successful for someone who has such a specific and, in my opinion, kind of overbearing style of filmmaking. Romeo and Juliet obviously was huge. Moulin Rouge was huge. Gatsby was huge. Elvis was huge. All of these were very, very financially successful movies. So, good on him. It must be connecting in some way. Otherwise, you wouldn't get that type of business. So, there are a couple things with Baz Luhrmann that I think are kind of the keys to unlocking his filmography and what I think of when I think of Baz Luhrmann. So I'm going to actually talk first about Michael Bay. Now, why Michael Bay? A lot of times, so Michael Bay has become a bit of a punchline. I think a lot more people are kind of coming around to realizing, okay, maybe we gave him a hard time, 10, 15 years ago, and they're kind of giving him a bit more grace. I think because you could say Michael Bay is a hack, you can say he overdoes it, but he still has some personality to his filmmaking. And a lot of the movies that come out now don't have much of a personality. Like, they could have been made by anybody. And at the very least, you got to give the guy credit. He's doing what he wants to do, and you can tell what a Michael Bay movie is. That says something. So why am I talking about Michael Bay when I'm supposed to be talking about Baz Luhrmann? Basically because I feel like a lot of the things people accuse Michael Bay of are actually more fitting with Baz Luhrmann and his style. So a lot of people, especially in kind of like the height of his popularity, like Bad Boys and Pearl Harbor and stuff, a lot of people were on Michael Bay's case for just being like, it's all style, there's no substance, it's so flashy, there's so many explosions, there's just so much stuff happening on screen. He's not really telling a story, he just has kind of a visual onslaught coming at you constantly. And basically you couldn't really... So let me back up a little bit. What I find as a viewer, the mark of a good director, a good filmmaker, is if you turn off the sound, can you at least tell what's happening? Can you figure out what's going on? Maybe you don't, obviously get all the plot details, but you should at least be able to get a general sense of, is there a good guy? Is there a bad guy? Is it more complicated than that? Where is everybody in relation to everybody else? These things you should be able to figure out just through the images on the screen. That's something that we refer to as film grammar. Like, how good a sense does someone have of film grammar? And a lot of people would say Michael Bay did not have that sense. And a lot of people also said at the time that our attention spans were shrinking. And he was one of those cases where they kind of came like, look at these action movies. Like, there's a shot every, second and a half. Like, no one can even figure out what's happening on the screen because you can't even pay attention. You're not sustaining a shot for more than a second or two. You should be able to, like, something that's come back around lately is that there are a lot more long continuous takes, things where you can actually watch them unfold almost in real time, and that adds some suspense and tension for the viewer. So thankfully we're kind of coming back to some traditional ideas about storytelling. So anyway, I've gone off on a little tangent here. The main point, like I said, is I think actually if you just watch them visually, God bless Baz Luhrmann's editor, because I don't know how you could take the footage that he has and make it into any sort of comprehensible story because just just trying to watch the movies, never mind what's happening with the soundtrack, it's almost impossible. Like there's just so much stuff going on that I find it overwhelming. I find it overbearing. And you want to talk about an attention span. I don't want to try something like timing out the shots in a Baz Luhrmann film, but I'd be willing to guess that it's very, very low as far as the duration, and in my view, not to very good effect. So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing is Luhrmann himself. Actually, I think this was in doing like press, or maybe it was on a commentary track or something. It was around the time of Moulin Rouge, so early 2000s. He said one of the things that he's really trying to do with his filmmaking is basically, you're watching a movie, you're watching a show, there's always kind of a lull after the first maybe 20, 30 minutes. You know, if let's say it's an action movie, you have your opening scene, you get everyone's attention, then you have a little exposition, then maybe you have a smaller scene to kind of keep the suspense and tension going, then maybe up the stakes a little bit. Like there's this constant kind of interplay of viewer engagement as well as like relaying information. The relaying information usually is with an exposition dump or just people sitting and talking. Luhrmann said what he's trying to do is avoid that lull that the viewer has. And so to combat this, he employs basically every trick imaginable. We have different film formats, we have iris in, iris out, we have crazy stuff going on in the soundtrack, we have fast motion, slow motion, close-ups, wide shots, like everything is just very, very jarring. And it's intentional, so I have to give him some credit there. He has some thought behind it. This is a purposeful thing that he's doing. And he's doing it because he wants you to keep watching the entire time. Like I said, I find it very distracting and kind of frankly overwhelming, but this is his style. This is what he's developed, and it seems to be working for him. I mean, he's over 30 years into a film career, and it's just getting more and more kind of specific to the way you think of a Wes Anderson movie, with the symmetry and these compositions and this kind of quirky music. I'm sorry to the microphone there. You can tell a Baz Luhrmann film. And that's kind of the point here, is that he's a visionary of sorts. He's doing something very specific, he has something in mind, and he's putting it on the screen. He's doing what he thinks he needs to do as a director to make that happen. So I do give him some respect, even though, like I said, I actually don't really care for a lot of his movies very much. So I'm going to go point by point with each movie. So probably only for a few minutes longer. This might be on the shorter side as far as these director spotlights go, but here we go. Strictly Ballroom, I actually loved. This was one of the only ones I'd never seen before doing this spotlight project, but got it from the library, popped it in. I think it's fantastic. It's funny, it's charming, it's offbeat and a little bit kooky in its humor, but the choreography is really nice, and this was before he had developed this really heightened style. but it works. Yes, it's a cliche story. Yes, you can tell what's going to happen just right at the start of it, but it's entertaining and it's really, really just a lot of fun and kind of a drop kick to cynicism. It just makes you smile. Romeo and Juliet, I know a lot of purists would probably complain that it's ridiculous to try and put this in the modern day. And yes, but all of it's ridiculous. I think that's part of the point. So I actually don't mind the modern day setting. What brought me out of Romeo and Juliet was the performances were just really, really bad. I'm sorry. I know Leonardo DiCaprio, this kind of vaulted him with Titanic to superstardom, and Claire Danes was probably never more popular than she was with this movie. But it's just listening to them try to get this dialogue out. They are not stage actors. They are pretty faces. And one of the critics I read pretty regularly, I think it was Matt Zoller Seitz. I might be mistaking it for a different film critic. But he said basically, when he was young, Leonardo DiCaprio was just such a pretty boy, like just aesthetically really nice to look at. And that carries a lot of this film. So, I mean, they knew what they were doing, they knew who they were casting, and they did exactly what they wanted to do. It is a very visually nice movie to look at. You got to give it that. But at the same time, again, this is where the style started with this big sweeping everything has to be turned up to 11, even 12, but it's just too much. And like I said, the delivery of these lines, ooh, it's rough. It's really, really just hard to listen to these people talk. Moulin Rouge, I actually kind of like this movie. I think it's pretty good, but it's again just undone with the overbearing editing. This the style, the constant cuts, it's just too much. I think it actually takes away from the performances, which are pretty good, especially Nicole Kidman, Ewan McGregor. They're really putting their hearts into this thing, but it's just so much. And this is where, when I was trying to just watch it, I'm like, oh my god, I can't even tell who is supposed to be where because we're cutting so fast. It was just too much for me. Australia, I thought this one was kind of dull, honestly. This seemed like Baz Luhrmann's attempt to make kind of an Oscar bait movie. Like, actually, most of his movies have been nominated for multiple Oscars, but this one seemed the most Oscar baity, if that makes sense. Like, this is your historical drama. It's a little less intense on the Baz Luhrmann-ness of it all. He's kind of dialed things back a little bit, but it's just not a very interesting story and frankly pretty forgettable. The Great Gatsby, again, this one's fine. I do like the use of color. I think it's really nice and vibrant, which is kind of reassuring because a lot of historical dramas, especially historical Oscar kind of dramas, tend to be really muted and pale, or, they all have that desaturated look, which is fine, but every once in a while you just really like to see a pop of color. It's really refreshing. So I liked that, but this one also suffered from the same issues that Romeo and Juliet did. I did not believe for a second these actors would talk this way. It would never, I never crossed over into disbelief. I was constantly like, ugh, these are just actors standing there and they sound really awkward. They look pretty, but they do not sound believable in any sense. And finally, Elvis, which I actually just finished very recently. This one, it kind of strikes a balance between the just insane over the top of Moulin Rouge with the more pulled back Australia. It still has a lot of moments and a lot of sequences that are just ridiculously over the top and nonstop, but there are some really nice quiet moments. I feel like if Lerman could learn to recognize, if he could just find a more appropriate rhythm to his films where he doesn't feel this need to just constantly barrage the viewer with visual information and just let the actors act, let a scene play out for a little bit. I think he could have another great film. Like, he's got one already. I think he could get another really great movie if he could just dial it back a little bit, Sometimes, yes, it's great to have a moment where you're like, look at this. This is so over the top. This is wild. But you need that measured with something that's a little slower, something that's a little easier to take in for the viewer, in my opinion. Now, obviously, like I said, he's been very successful. He's made a lot of money doing this, and he's made a lot of other people a lot of money. So I imagine he's just going to keep doing what he's doing, obviously. But for what it's worth, that's my opinion. I feel like he's got the goods, and he can do some great things. Just needs to scale back the style a little bit and give the movies some time to breathe, if that makes sense. Let the viewer catch their breath too. So anyway, we've been talking about Baz Luhrmann for what it's worth. I know we had a lot of Michael Bay stuff in there. I'll probably have some other feature in the future where I actually go through Michael Bay's filmography because, like I said, I feel like he had a bad rap for a while and people are kind of turning around on him. But today was Baz Luhrmann. Overall, I think he's pretty talented. I think he's a visionary filmmaker in a field and in a time where we do not have a lot of those. So it is refreshing to see his work, but at the same time, I'm constantly frustrated watching it because it's just way too much. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please like it, share it. If you've been listening on Spotify, subscribe. We're going to get back to the book reviews. If you've been watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. Just subscribe everywhere. You can find it, Mad Crazy Reviews. Just do a search. I think the only thing I'm not on these days is TikTok, so you'll probably find me. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed it.